The prison yard looked calm that morning, but something dangerous was already moving from cell to cell. At a federal prison in Texas, guards later said it started with whispers, not shouts, not violence, just quiet words passed during prayer time, meal lines, and late-night talks through steel doors. One inmate was not just serving time, he was teaching. He spoke about war, duty, and a false promise of honor. By the time officers realized what was happening, several inmates were already repeating the same phrases, the same beliefs, and the same hatred. Some were planning what they would do when they got out. What shocked investigators most was not that the ideas existed, it was how fast they spread, and how close the prison came to releasing men who believed they were soldiers for ISIS. The moment federal agents stepped in, they found handwritten notes, extremist slogans, and secret conversations that showed something terrifying. This was not talk for comfort or religion. This was preparation. This was ideology, meant to turn prisoners into weapons after release. But the biggest question still hung in the air. How did ISIS reach inside an American prison? To understand that, you have to go back to the early years after ISIS rose to power overseas. As the group carried out brutal attacks in the Middle East and inspired violence around the world, the United States arrested dozens of people connected to terrorist groups. Some were captured abroad and brought to the US. Others were homegrown extremists convicted in federal courts. All of them eventually entered the prison system. Most people believe prison ends danger. In reality, prison can sometimes become a classroom. Federal cases later showed that some convicted extremists did not stop believing when the cell door closed. Instead, they adapted. They learned how to speak carefully. They learned how to hide messages inside normal conversations. They learned how to find people who felt angry, broken, or lost. Prisons are full of men searching for meaning. Some are scared, some feel forgotten, some want power in a place where they have none. Extremist inmates saw this as an opening. In several real cases, inmates already convicted of terrorism began meeting others during prayer services or recreation time. They spoke about injustice, war, and the idea that America was the enemy. They offered brotherhood, protection, purpose. For inmates with no direction, those words felt powerful. One of the most serious cases involved a convicted terrorist who openly praised ISIS while incarcerated. He passed out handwritten materials and explained violent ideas step by step, careful not to say too much in front of guards. He encouraged inmates to prepare themselves physically and mentally for future missions. The plan was simple and deadly. Do your time, get out, then act. Federal prosecutors later revealed that these conversations were not harmless. Some inmates discussed attacking government buildings. Others talked about traveling overseas to join ISIS fighters. The prison had unknowingly become a place where future threats were being shaped. Still, this was not happening everywhere. Most prisons never saw this level of activity, but even one case was enough to scare officials. The Federal Bureau of Prisons began noticing patterns. Certain inmates tried to gather small groups. Certain phrases kept repeating. Certain prisoners suddenly changed how they talked, dressed, and thought. What looked like religious interest slowly turned into extremist belief. Guards were trained to watch closely, but this was not easy. Prison staff must respect religious freedom. That made it harder to tell the difference between faith and radicalization. Extremists used this gap to hide in plain sight. Then came the turning point. In one investigation, authorities intercepted conversations that crossed a line. These were not ideas anymore. These were plans. Federal agents moved fast, separating inmates, seizing materials, and placing suspects under tighter control. The case ended with new charges and longer sentences, stopping the spread before inmates could leave prison. But the damage was already done. Some prisoners had absorbed the ideology deeply. Officials worried about those who might be released without anyone knowing how far their beliefs had gone. That fear forced law enforcement to rethink how prisons handle extremist inmates. Special housing units were created, communications were limited, mail was screened, phone calls were monitored. Intelligence agencies worked directly with prison officials, sharing information in ways that had never happened before. Even so, experts warned the problem was not over. ISIS had lost territory overseas, but its ideas were still alive, and ideas do not need borders. As one investigator later said, prison walls stop bodies, not beliefs. By the end of the investigation, one truth was clear. ISIS ideology had not just touched U.S. prisons, it had tested them. And while some plots were stopped in time, officials knew others might still be hidden, waiting quietly for release dates to arrive. And that leads to the most frightening thought of all. What happens when a radicalized inmate walks free, carrying a mission learned behind bars? That question would soon push U.S. prisons into a new era of surveillance, fear, and urgent reform, as authorities raced to stop the next attack before it ever left the prison gates. And just as officials thought they had regained control, another disturbing discovery surfaced inside a different facility, proving the threat was far from over. The warning came too late.
In a different federal prison, hundreds of miles away, a routine mail check uncovered something that made officers freeze. Hidden inside a letter that looked harmless were words that did not belong in any prison. The language praised ISIS leaders and spoke of sacrifice, loyalty, and revenge. It was written carefully, like someone knew exactly how far they could go without being obvious. When investigators traced the letter, it led to an inmate who had never been charged with terrorism before. That discovery changed everything. Until that moment, officials believed the problem was limited to inmates already convicted of terror crimes. Now they faced a darker truth. ISIS ideology was spreading beyond known extremists. It was reaching ordinary inmates who entered prison for unrelated crimes and were leaving with dangerous beliefs. And some of them were getting close to release. Federal agents quietly stepped in. They reviewed phone calls, read past letters, and listened to recorded conversations. What they found was disturbing but real. Small groups were forming inside the prison. No uniforms, no flags, just shared beliefs whispered at the right moments. These inmates spoke about ISIS victories, shared propaganda stories, and repeated talking points straight from overseas extremist networks. The method was always the same. First came sympathy, the system is against you. Then came blame, America did this to us. Finally came purpose, you can be part of something bigger. For inmates who felt angry or forgotten, those words felt powerful. One former inmate later told investigators that he was approached during prayer time. The man speaking to him never said the word ISIS at first. He talked about brotherhood and justice. Only weeks later did the real message come out. By then, the trust was already built. This slow approach made it hard for guards to notice. There were no fights, no threats, just conversations. That silence made the danger grow. Officials also discovered that some inmates memorized extremist material instead of keeping it written down. That way, searches would find nothing. Others used coded language during phone calls, knowing calls were recorded. They replaced violent words with religious terms or everyday phrases. To the untrained ear, it sounded normal, but intelligence teams began connecting the dots. One case revealed an inmate who openly said he wanted to join ISIS after release. Another spoke about attacking police officers. A third talked about traveling overseas. These were not jokes. These were statements made during monitored conversations. Once again, authorities acted fast. Inmates were separated. Transfers were made quietly. Some prisoners were moved into special units where communication was tightly controlled. Prosecutors added new charges to certain cases, extending sentences and preventing release. But stopping them inside prison was only half the battle. The bigger fear was what happened outside. Federal reports later confirmed that several individuals inspired by ISIS ideology while incarcerated attempted to act after release. Some were arrested quickly. Others were stopped by undercover operations before they could hurt anyone. Each case proved the same point. Prison radicalization did not end at the prison gate. It followed people home. This forced U.S. prisons into a difficult position. Guards are not intelligence agents. Prisons are built to punish and rehabilitate, not fight international terrorism. Yet now they were on the front line. Training changed. Officers learned to recognize warning signs, sudden behavior changes, new language patterns, obsession with extremist videos or slogans. Chaplains were included in prevention efforts to help separate faith from violence. Mental health staff became part of the solution. Still, the system struggled. Every move had to balance safety and rights. Inmates are allowed religion. They are allowed speech. The challenge was stopping violent ideology without crossing legal lines. Extremists knew this and pushed the limits every chance they got. By the time officials felt they had control, another case surfaced. This one involved a convicted extremist who had already served years in prison. Investigators discovered he had tried to recruit inmates at multiple facilities after being transferred. Every time he moved, the ideology moved with him. It was like trying to stop smoke with bare hands. Law enforcement began calling it a long game. Extremists did not need fast results. They needed belief. Once planted, belief could grow on its own. As ISIS lost power overseas, their supporters adjusted their strategy. Instead of focusing on large attacks, they pushed lone actors. One person, one mission, one moment. That idea fit perfectly inside prison walls. And then came the most chilling realization. Some inmates were not waiting to be told what to do. They were already planning. By the end of this phase of investigations, officials understood something deeply unsettling. Even when no attack happened, even when no weapons were found, the threat was still real. Because ideology does not disappear when ignored, it waits. And as release dates approached for certain inmates, authorities faced a terrifying countdown. They knew who some of these men were. They knew what they believed, but stopping thoughts is harder than stopping actions. The question was no longer whether ISIS ideology had spread inside U.S. prisons. The question was whether anyone could stop what came next. Because outside the prison walls, freedom was only days away for someone who believed violence was a duty.
The countdown had already started. In a federal office far from the prison walls, analysts stared at a release date on the screen. An inmate linked to extremist conversations was days away from freedom. He had not been caught planning an attack. He had not been caught with weapons. But recordings showed something else. Belief, commitment, silence when asked direct questions. That silence was louder than any threat. Officials knew this was the most dangerous moment. When prison doors open, control disappears. This fear was not imaginary. In past real cases, men influenced by ISIS ideology while incarcerated were arrested shortly after release for planning violence. Some tried to contact known extremists. Others searched online for attack methods. A few were stopped just in time through undercover operations. Each case followed a similar path: prison, radical belief, release, action. This time, authorities did not want to be late. As the release date approached, federal agents increased surveillance. Phone records were reviewed. Old letters were reread. Associates outside prison were identified. The goal was simple. If he moved toward violence, they would stop him before anyone got hurt. Inside the prison, the mood was tense. Correctional officers watched closely, knowing their power was about to end. They had seen how ideas spread quietly, how one conversation could change a man forever. Some officers later said the hardest part was knowing they might never learn if they succeeded or failed, because if nothing happened, no one would know how close danger came. After release, the former inmate did what many do. He went home. He saw family. He looked normal. That normal behavior made things worse. Extremism does not always look angry. Sometimes it looks calm and patient. Behind the scenes, agents followed carefully. Days passed, then weeks. Then, a message appeared. The former inmate reached out to someone online using coded language that investigators recognized. It was not a clear threat, but it carried the same phrases used inside prison, the same justifications, the same us versus them thinking. To trained eyes, it was a warning sign. Agents moved in. The arrest did not make headlines at first. It was quiet, controlled, but the charges told the real story, attempting to provide support to a terrorist organization, statements of intent, plans that were forming, even if not yet complete. Another attack stopped before it began. This case confirmed what officials had feared for years. Prison radicalization does not end with incarceration. It can survive, it can wait, and it can resurface when freedom returns. After this arrest, U.S. prison policy shifted again. High-risk inmates were tracked more closely after release. Information sharing between prisons and law enforcement improved. Risk assessments became stricter. The system adapted, but not without cost. Some critics argued the measures went too far. Others said they were not enough, but everyone agreed on one thing: the threat was real. Experts studying these cases noticed a pattern. ISIS supporters inside prisons rarely rushed people into violence. They focused on patience, identity, loyalty. Once belief took hold, action could come later, sometimes years later. That made the threat harder to detect. By this stage, ISIS as a physical group was weaker overseas, but ideology does not need territory, it needs minds. And prisons, filled with frustration and loss, remained a target. Former inmates who rejected extremism later described how close they came. One said he almost believed violence was the only way to matter. Another said prison made him feel invisible until someone offered him a mission. Those stories showed how thin the line could be. For every case stopped, officials worried about the ones they missed. Inside federal reports, one sentence appeared again and again: the threat remains ongoing. Prisons were no longer just holding facilities. They had become battlefields of belief. Guards were not just watching for fights, they were watching for ideas, words, shifts in thinking, and that pressure never stopped. As time passed, new inmates arrived, new conversations started, new risks formed. Even with strict controls, officials knew no system was perfect. All it took was one overlooked conversation, one missed signal, one release without follow-up. That reality haunted investigators, because the most dangerous extremists are not always loud. They are quiet, they wait, they blend in. And as long as prisons exist, the possibility remains. ISIS ideology did not break prison walls with force. It slipped through gaps, through trust, through silence. And once inside, it proved how hard ideas are to lock away. By the end of these investigations, authorities faced a hard truth. They could stop some plots, they could disrupt some networks, but they could not erase belief. And that meant the fight did not end with arrests or sentences. It continued every day, in every prison, in every quiet conversation no one hears. Because somewhere, right now, another inmate may be listening and deciding who they want to be when the doors finally open. The next warning did not come from a prison. It came from outside. Late one night, federal agents received intelligence that made their stomachs drop. A former inmate, previously flagged for extremist influence while incarcerated, had disappeared from routine monitoring. He missed a scheduled check-in. His phone went silent. His online activity stopped all at once. To trained investigators, this was not relief, it was danger. Silence meant preparation.
This was the nightmare officials feared most. Someone shaped by ISIS ideology behind bars, now free, now invisible. Agents moved quickly. They retraced every step of his time in prison, who he spoke to, who he prayed with, who mentored him. They reviewed notes from guards who once reported concerning conversations. At the time, nothing had been strong enough to keep him locked up. Now those small warnings felt painfully loud. Search teams began working across state lines. Hours passed, then days. Finally, a break came, a tip from a community member who noticed strange behavior. The former inmate had spoken about sacrifice and destiny. He had asked questions about security locations. He had changed overnight. Law enforcement acted before the sun came up.
When agents found him, they discovered extremist materials, digital propaganda, and messages praising ISIS attacks overseas. No bomb, no weapon yet, but the intent was clear. He was moving toward violence. Another attack was stopped before it could happen. This case never became a household name, but inside law enforcement, it changed everything. It proved that prison radicalization could echo long after release. It proved that ideology learned behind bars could turn into action months or even years later. And it proved that the cost of missing one warning sign could be lives. After this case, officials began speaking openly about the problem. Congressional reports described prisons as vulnerable spaces for extremist recruitment. Intelligence agencies warned that terrorist groups saw incarcerated populations as opportunities. Training programs expanded again. Data sharing became faster. Risk lists grew longer. Still, no system could promise safety forever. Former prison officials admitted something difficult. You can lock down bodies. You can monitor phones, you can restrict movement, but you cannot fully control thoughts. And once belief takes root, it is hard to pull out. This is what made ISIS ideology so dangerous inside prisons. It did not rely on commands, it relied on meaning. It offered answers to men who felt powerless. It turned anger into purpose. That formula did not require large numbers, just one believer was enough. Experts now say the greatest threat is not large prison terror cells, it is lone actors, individuals shaped quietly, patiently, over time. People who leave prison appearing normal, but carrying dangerous beliefs beneath the surface. These cases forced a hard question. Is prison stopping terrorism or sometimes reshaping it? For every story where intervention worked, there were unanswered fears about the unknown. The conversations never overheard, the beliefs never recorded, the people released without suspicion. Officials continued to watch. Every day, somewhere in the United States, a prison door opens. Most of the time, nothing happens. Life goes on. But sometimes, that door releases someone carrying more than a sentence behind them. ISIS may no longer control large land overseas. Its leaders may be dead or captured, but ideology does not need armies. It only needs space to grow. And prisons, by their nature, will always be spaces of struggle, loss, and identity. That is why this story doesn't truly end, because the real battle is not just inside cells or courtrooms, it is inside minds. It is fought quietly, without explosions or headlines, long before violence ever appears. Authorities remain alert, guards remain watchful, communities remain hopeful. But the question still lingers in every investigation file and every risk assessment. How many warning signs are enough? And how many stories like this never come close enough to disaster for anyone to notice? As long as prisons exist, and as long as extremist ideology searches for new ground, the threat remains. Waiting,
watching for the next door to open. And that is where this story leaves us, not with an ending, but with a warning. Prison walls are meant to keep danger locked away. But this story shows that ideas do not stay behind bars. ISIS did not need weapons or orders to spread inside U.S. prisons. It used words. It used silence. It used broken moments to plant belief. Most inmates were never turned violent. Most releases lead back to normal life. But it only takes one person, shaped quietly behind bars, to change everything. The real danger is not always loud. Sometimes it walks free without anyone noticing. As long as prisons exist, and as long as extremist ideology looks for new minds, the question remains unanswered. Are we stopping the threat or just delaying it? Because the next warning may not come from a prison cell. It may come from the outside.